following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Question: who is lying to you today? The media? Social media? Big business? Politicians? Actually, it's probably all of them. That led me to create this podcast named They're All Lying to Us. We do research and present findings and opinions on political, social, and cultural topics to inform our communities about what's really going on. You know, stuff that affects everyday American life. We also invite you to share your voice and help us recreate real-life interactions as they were had in the pre-digital era. I'm your host for these conversations. My name is Andy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of They're All Lying to Us, or as we call it for shorthand, TALUS. So welcome aboard. I also want to direct everybody, if you have a moment, to our website, which is www.lyingtous.com. There you'll find blogs on our blog site articles and also our older archived sections of all of our podcasts, the pre-existing podcasts as well. So without much further ado, I'm going to start talking about today's topic, and just a quick, real intro, high-level intro. The title to the blog that is accompanying this is TikTok, the next giant Chinese balloon to be shot down by the U.S. So today's topic is TikTok, and without much further ado, let's launch this topic today. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to They're All Lying to Us. Today's topic is the TikTok clock running out. Last week, Congress appeared to be in the mood for an old-fashioned Western duel by giving TikTok an ultimatum: terminate the ownership of Chinese Communist government in the short-form video entertainment platform, or we, Congress, will terminate TikTok. Now, TikTok is a social media platform with the potential to overreach using user data and pose a national security threat. And that's the kind of online manipulation intrigue that led to the creation of They're All Lying to Us. So, of course, we had to dig deeper, if for no other reason than to provide an appropriate online grave for a social media giant. TikTok, the new social media behemoth. It's a name synonymous with a short-form video entertainment, and it's seen an astronomical rise since its inception. Initially launched in China in September of 2016, just less than 8 years ago, by ByteDance, TikTok, known as Douyin in China, apologies to the Chinese people for me poorly mispronouncing that, I assume, but it quickly amassed a large user base. And as of last year, 2023, TikTok had over 1.5 billion monthly active users and is projected to reach 1.8 billion by the end of this year. TikTok's user base is diverse, spanning numerous countries and demographics. TikTok is the world's 5th largest social platform, trailing only Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, and Instagram. So here are some highlights of TikTok's presence in the United States. Currently, there are over 150 million monthly users, and likely just over 100 million regular users. About 2/3 of US users are aged 12 to 34. Globally, 36% of TikTok users are aged 18 to 24. While one source indicated that US adults spend an average of 55 minutes on the app, another source indicated that users age 11 to 17, basically teenagers, spent 113 minutes per day on TikTok. In other words, just under 2 hours. And compare that to the 40 minutes per day that the same group spends on YouTube. So you know where today's youth is going. And nearly 40% of Gen Z, that is 12 to 27-year-olds for those of you scoring at home, they're using Instagram and TikTok for searches rather than Google. So let me give a quick intro to what's on TikTok. Myself being a newbie, I wasn't sure much what's on TikTok, but to get familiar with it, I took a little look. And while some may say that TikTok's content varies widely from entertainment and dance to educational material, it appears that most of the content is short videos of less than a minute, typically involving some dancing or kids, dogs, or cats doing ridiculous things. In my first venture into TikTok's site, I found myself watching a 6-minute video of soccer superstar Lionel Messi shopping at a Publix in Florida with his family. My impression of Messi, he seems to be a decent guy, stopping several times, allowing shoppers to take a picture with him. My impressions of TikTok, as I watched the video, I could feel the slow passage of time. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The minutes falling off the clock, while more of my brain cells died. And it kind of reminded me when I was a kid or a teen myself, watching MTV back in the 1980s. Same kind of feeling, watching stuff over and over again while my brain cells were dying. So with that little intro to what is TikTok, let's take a look on just how Americans are dependent on TikTok for things like entertainment, news, business, and jobs. What are American adults spending 55 minutes a day looking at on TikTok? Hashtag statistics show that entertainment is by far the number one content category. 43% of American TikTok users regularly get their news from TikTok as well. As for businesses, companies are increasing advertising on TikTok, often competing to make the most catchy, entertaining video to do so. And among the most followed brands on TikTok are WWE, the wrestling folks, ESPN, Netflix, Dunkin', and Chipotle. So some TikTok creators even make a living off of being an influencer. One influencer made $120,000 a year from his side hustle on TikTok. TikTok also directly employs nearly 7,000 persons in the United States and has offices in Los Angeles and New York. So we started talking about how Congress had taken up a bill, the House of Representatives, to ban TikTok. Basically not ban it, but to require either the Chinese Communist Party divest itself of its ownership of TikTok or face being banned inside the United States. So here's a list of some of the primary reasons why some believe that TikTok should be banned, or at least banned should the Chinese government continue to be an owner. One item, TikTok can be used as a tool of the Chinese government to compromise US government workers or others, for example, by blackmailing them. TikTok already showed a propensity to do this when it spied on several journalists who were investigating TikTok's surveillance of app users. In a broader sense, TikTok's algorithm could be manipulated to sway public opinion in the United States. If one saw how TikTok was able to activate its users last week to contact congressional offices to protest the proposed ban of TikTok in the United States, one could see how that might actually work. Since Chinese law requires any organization or citizen in China to support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work, TikTok could conceivably be compelled by the Chinese government to assist in such an effort. Another reason for banning TikTok: China blocks most US social media platforms, including Google, YouTube, X, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. Why? Because because those companies refuse to file Chinese government rules on data collection. So it seemed fair to for the US to do the same to TikTok. Now, another reason to ban TikTok: when former President Trump had sought to ban TikTok in 2020, China responded by adding content recommendation algorithms to its export control list, basically meaning that it restricted one of TikTok's most valuable assets and seemingly limiting the attractiveness of TikTok to a potential prospective U.S. purchaser. This suggests China does indeed value TikTok as a government asset. Another reason, TikTok has previously been fined for mishandling child data, including recently fined $370 million by the EU. Now, another reason we can consider banning TikTok is that the US has a history of limiting foreign ownership of certain critical media assets. When it comes to a broadcast license, such as TV licenses, there is a long-standing law which limits foreign ownership of such broadcast licenses to 20%. In fact, Australian-born media mogul Rupert Murdoch became a US citizen in the mid-1980s to facilitate his purchase and creation of the Fox television network. Again, these rules are still on the books. Reasons why TikTok should not be banned. Well, first of all, it's just damn fun. It may be silly, but it's an incredible form of entertainment for many, as mentioned, especially our youth. Another reason why it shouldn't be banned is that it's a significant economic force. I mentioned it employs nearly 7,000 Americans, and it is a growing platform for U.S. businesses to market and sell products. Another reason, there are many other Americans who rely on TikTok for income. Their livelihoods may be at stake. TikTok also argues, and others also argue, that free speech would be limited by a ban of the TikTok platform. Now, another reason why we might not want to get rid of TikTok is that killing TikTok would only enhance the already great online power of other social media platforms, including Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram, and Google, which would regain searches it's currently losing to TikTok. And Google also happens to own another video platform that you may have heard of, YouTube. And then, of course, when considering what to do with TikTok, there's politics. Getting the Chinese government out of TikTok seems to be one of those issues with broad support from Democrats and Republicans. The House of Representatives passed the Chinese government must sell TikTok or TikTok will be banned bill, as I call it, by 362 to 65. An unusual sign of cross-the-aisle cooperation and agreement in today's Washington. But now the Senate has seemed to pause, perhaps in part due to mixed views from the public. Just 1 year ago, 59% of Americans saw TikTok as a threat to national security, suggesting a clear majority favored a ban. More recently, it seemed like it had become about 50-50 issue. This change in attitude might cause one to believe that TikTok's power of influence is quite effective, and perhaps enough to stop the latest bill in its track. So while we're talking politics, what about Joe Biden? Well, TikTok's influence on its youthful base of users may also answer the question of why has the TikTok issue arisen now? Though we all may want to forget that 2024 is another presidential election year, it is no secret that President Biden is struggling with his popularity among American youths. One issue making Biden particularly unpopular with youths is American support of Israel in its war on Hamas and Gaza. Against that backdrop, the Wall Street Journal observed that one of the major reasons behind the urgency to pass this Stop TikTok bill could be Washington's concern over the abundance of content regarding the Israeli actions toward Palestinians in Gaza. In the same article, an analysis of TikTok determined that views of videos with pro-Palestinian hashtags outnumbered those with pro-Israel hashtags by 69 to 1, which is, just as amazing, which is probably as bad as, and I'll play a little joke here to Rich, my friend from Western New York State. It's probably as bad as the odds of the Bills ever winning a Super Bowl. But in any event, we turn to the other main presidential candidate in 2024, Donald Trump. And Donald seems to have done a little TikTok flip-flop. Now, the former president recently opposed the idea of banning TikTok. This is very recently, because remember, a few years ago in 2020, when he was president, he had tried to ban TikTok. So now he's turned around and he's opposing this idea of banning TikTok, which is a notable reversal from his previous stance during his presidency. This change in position follows his meeting with someone named Jeff Yass, a GOP mega donor and a hedge fund manager with a significant financial interest in TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. Yass has been a substantial contributor to the Club for Growth, which is a conservative group that has expressed opposition to the anti-TikTok effort and has advocated for free speech and innovation, values Yass aligns with. Trump's newfound opposition to the TikTok ban was made public after his engagement with Yass and the Club for Growth, suggesting that financial and ideological influences from his supporters might be shaping his views on this matter. Alternatively, maybe Trump just sees that TikTok's continued existence may further erode Biden's popularity with youth voters, and that could be a big item when it comes to this year's November election. So now that we've had an intro to TikTok, allow me to bring in our producer, Rich, who's coming in from sunny Niagara Falls, New York, for a further discussion and maybe to talk down some of my crazy ideas on what I think we should do with TikTok. So, Rich, welcome aboard.
How are we doing today?
I'm doing very well. It's about sunny and it's about 75 degrees down here in Sarasota, Florida.
We had summer last week. We're back to cold.
Yeah,
so,
yep.
you know,
that little groundhog, I think he lied to you.
Yeah, we're gonna that's gonna put a hit out on the groundhog. That's what my son said to me today. So, yeah, I mean, I it's funny. I got up this morning and read the blog in preparation, you know, and I'm kind of I'm my position on TikTok has evolved somewhat. Yeah, so I agree with. I pretty much love your analysis. I thought it's well written, and I think I really kind of think you covered it quite well.
Yeah, I know we had talked before a little bit about, last week after we did last week's episode, and we talked about, the TikTok thing had just come out in Congress, right, and the big, to do was already there, which seems like it's died down a little bit already, but I'm sure it's going to rear its ugly head soon here in the next few weeks. But you had mentioned that you knew a lot of business people that used it and things like that. So
I have a lot of
personal anecdotal stories.
I have a person that I have done some business with locally that's our age that has a storefront, and she does TikTok Tuesdays with her daughter, who helps her run her business. It's basically a family business. She's really the only employee, and her daughter and her produce TikToks on Tuesday, and she gets a ton of followers. They're well produced, drives a lot of business to her store. There's another woman I know that's probably 35. She had a storefront. She really, she's a fashion person, and she's basically closed the storefront and does all her sales through her apps, including TikTok. So that's just two people that I know that are not 12-year-olds or 18-year-olds that are just making silly TikToks of them on St. Patrick's Day or cats or whatever. And their livelihood is dependent on this app. And my discussion with one of them was, well, why TikTok and not just and they do Instagram Reels and they do a YouTube and all that stuff too. But they feel that the business, the structure, the way it works with them on TikTok is much more supportive. The algorithms are more supportive to what they're trying to accomplish with those accounts. And so it's going to have a significant impact on them if TikTok is unwilling to sell their Chinese shares, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, it seems like TikTok has become more of a playground for big companies too that are marketing. As I mentioned, a lot of big names are out there and they're doing those things. And it seems like,
well, here's why. Think about it. You can go and get YouTube Premium, or you can go and get Hulu Plus or whatever, and you can purchase those apps to watch whatever you're watching and not see commercials. So how is Tide and Wendy's and everybody else going to stay in front of you. So they're going to start shifting their ads to the platforms where they're going to get exposure. And to some of those companies' credit, like Dunkin' Donuts and things like that, they've created the types of ads they're creating is for the TikTok generation. I had a meeting today at 2:00 with someone that I'm going to be doing some video production work for, and he is our age. And I said to him, I said, these videos have to be on TikTok. And he said, you're right. He goes, because I'm trying to reach younger people with the information that the videos are that I'm going to be producing for him are about. So it's not that we aren't going to put it on Instagram. We're still going to put it on Instagram, and we'll probably do a Facebook link, and we'll do all that stuff. But you've got to, it's like if you're going to advertise, you have to advertise in the old days in the newspaper and a billboard and the phone book. Now you have to find the places that you have to advertise now. So, so I get the business side of it. I definitely do. And I do also get the fact that the federal government wants this Chinese interest because, as you mentioned, Rupert Murdoch had to go through this, and other foreign ownership has had to go through different things because, we have regulations in the country about foreign ownership of certain things. And those are not new rules. Those are rules that we've had for years and years and years. So I just wish that the federal government, the FCC in particular, as well as Congress, would have been monitoring and regulating social media for the last 20 years. And not just
they're a little late to the game, right?
Yeah, like they did a terrible job with social media in general, websites, internet. Now they're just bad with social media platforms. Like it's their, and that's why it's disingenuous to me, the whole process, because like they have these goofy hearings where they bring in, the guys from all these other companies, and then they yell at them and they get their 3 minutes of fame, and then nothing changes. They don't change the rules.
Right.
And the guys sit there and they say, yeah, well, we're trying. And then, no, you're not. And then everybody goes home and they pat themselves on the back for a job well done. And nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
Instagram has made some changes about targeting younger people and blah, 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 but not enough everybody knows the harmful things that social media is doing. And TikTok is just the same as the rest of them, except it's owned by China.
Right. Just adds another layer of intrigue to it. It's not that Russian bots didn't try to influence elections before on Facebook and other social media platforms, or
this stuff is all well documented. It's not there's proof of this stuff. There's all kinds of proof of these things, and it's not like they've gone and done anything to those. Making sure that Facebook has whatever to make sure that those companies or those countries or whatever can't do what they're doing. They have made no effort to change that.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk isn't a native of this country, and he's controlling a lot of messages and apparently changing algorithms, or at least.
Well, they all changed.
When he first took over Twitter and made it X, he also did some things where, like, I forget what he did. He did some weird things where, like, everybody, like every algorithm had to point something towards his own feed or something like that.
Yeah, that's what, like, most
weird. I don't quote me on that as being exactly right, but there was definitely some weirdness that happened when he first took it over. So any of these platforms are subject to that, and that's just scary.
A couple of points that I wanted to make from your blog that I thought were really good was the reference that people go to social media sites like TikTok and they search for topics there, as opposed to going to Google. But that's not a new thing, because 10 years ago, when I was trying to get my school district to allow the kids to have access to YouTube, you would have thought that I was asking them to have access to the devil himself and alcohol or something.
I've heard that about
schools.
You, Rick.
They really thought of YouTube as the end of society. But 10 years ago, the number one search engine for people under the age of 30 was YouTube.
Right.
And it's still up there. It's still, it's still up there pretty good. But now, since a lot of younger folks have, they were on Facebook, and then they went to Snapchat, and they went to Instagram, and now they're on TikTok, and now they're getting mad because their parents are joining TikTok. So in 5 years, all the kids are going to be on a new app because they don't want their parents following them onto these sites, which is kind of the funny thing. So they're all cyclical. I mean,
Well, they probably, like I said, they probably should have banned MTV when we were kids too, right? So
nobody watches MTV. So
yeah, I mean, I noticed. I mean, in part of doing the research for the article and finding out more about TikTok as well, a number of the places where I found data and things like that are marketing firms.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, okay, here's the best way for you as a company. So they give you all this data and they prove to you that, okay, here's the marketplace for it, and this is why. And one of the places indicated that a lot of bigger companies more big companies, the higher percentage of companies were planning to increase their spend of marketing on TikTok this year than they were on Facebook or other platforms, because better return on investment, whatever have you. Also, maybe reaching maybe it fits their customer base more. And another thing that I noticed from looking at it was that they talked about how if you want to get on here, you really got to be short, quippy with videos. So in other words, don't view this podcast unless you bring a cat or a dog in here to show you how it can dance or bounce a ball on its nose. But you need something really catchy and things like that to attract people. And that's it's kind of like, I would say, I was thinking about this, is TikTok's like a place where you have Super Bowl commercials it's like commercials that people try out. Right. It has to be catchy and very different and it kind of cutting edge, and it can come from anybody. So it's very interesting that it's kind of this oddball platform. I wish that the other thing that occurred to me while I was looking stuff up was, so they talk about forcing the sale, and the Chinese government only owns a portion of it. But they were talking about forcing the sale from the Chinese government. And the problem might be is if the Chinese government takes away this algorithm, it would basically devalue the company to a large extent, because that's where a lot of the value comes, other than its already established user base and everything else, in having the platform technology. The biggest technology that it has is the algorithm that generates user content to particular people like you or me. It'll figure out what you like and it'll start forwarding that stuff to you. And I just think that that might make a purchase by a US entity. First of all, since it's has a value in the hundreds of billions of dollars, TikTok does, probably, at least some sources indicate such, that it would take a really big American company to buy it. And in addition to that, if you take away that algorithm or some of its greatest assets, they might not even be willing to do it. So the sale of the platform could be very difficult unless it's forced to the point where the value would have to be driven down by the fact that it's going to be closed up, in which case the TikTok people might say, we have to sell it. Kind of reminds me of NFL free agency the past week. Is, at a certain point when nobody has an interest and you're not going to be taken, you'll take a 6th round draft choice to trade a quarterback, to trade Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers, because you're not going to get anything out of it if you don't take that, and you're going to have to pay him.
I feel like the government's approach to this has been disingenuous, because TikTok's not doing any different algorithms than any other social media site is doing. And argue that but why you don't like what China does is no different from what the other ones are doing, but you're unwilling to put in regulations as opposed to just changing ownership. So so for example, the war in Ukraine starts, and so all the Russian oligarchs basically had to sell their interests. So for example, my son's a big Chelsea FC fan. out of England, and the Russian owner had to sell the team to the guy who owns the Dodgers, and he's doing fine. He's not great, but whatever. So there's money out there, there's buyers out there, and but the government stepped in and said, nope, we don't want any more Russian. It was funny, they don't seem to care about like the Saudi Arabian oligarchs or, they don't Manchester City or whoever, like they don't, they seem to worry about it. It's just certain ones. And again, if government, in my big thing with all of this is that they're not keeping anyone safe. They're not keeping people's data safe. They make no effort to do it.
Right.
And they, unless they're willing to go after everybody and actually write some laws, then it's, that you can make the point of China. And I agree with one of the other big points you made is that, and I was mentioning this blog to my son, who's 25, and we were discussing that there's also, they don't like the fact that there's a lot of politicians don't like the fact that on TikTok, there's a lot of information about what's going on in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And that has led to stuff that, our presidents, current president and former president had to say the last couple of days, the guy running the Senate, all had something new to say. And people are very shaken to the core that all of a sudden that we're people are being accused of being anti-Semitic. And I don't think that that's true. I think that but people don't like the fact that suddenly we're questioning, and now they're switching the conversation, but I'm not naive enough to believe that this doesn't have a lot to do with folks that are mad that we're being critical of Israel. And I hate to say that, but
it got them. You're right. They were sitting on their hands, and now they got off their hands and said something had to hit. It's like everything else. Something had to hit them close to home.
Everything that I've seen on
their
TikTok,
popularity.
Everything that I've seen on TikTok that is pro-Palestinian, not pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, or just supportive of Palestinians is no different from the stuff that I'm seeing on Instagram. It's the same stuff. It's the same videos, many of the same creators, but for whatever reason, they're using TikTok because there's more of it. And like you brought a statistic, I think it was 59 or something to 1 or whatever it was.
69 to 1, yeah.
And it's different. It's for whatever reason, the fact that this was the only thing that we could get all our politicians to agree on in the last whatever number of years is bizarre to me, which means that I don't trust it.
Well, one of my on the other hand, like I hope I had raised in the blog was that, does this mean that maybe China's helping to manipulate that? Or in these instances, it's drawn attention to the fact that groups that we are not friendly with in the world or might be considered enemies can use this platform against us. And this is making it clear, whether you like it or not, they're making it clear that it has that power to do that. I'm not contesting the veracity of anything that's posted there or not at this point, but they can certainly. The point is taken that they've changed. They've changed the dialogue among. It's one of the main places where it's changed the dialogue.
Isn't that what we want? Don't we want the reason why we wanted, a competitive market is so that we don't hear the same 3 stories on the same 3 major networks. And then, we see slight variations on whether it's the conservative one versus the progressive one, but it's all the same stories. And how dare these young startups, so to speak, suddenly try, and young people found this on their own. They didn't need like young people's positions on things that, not just Gaza, but just in general, young people's positions on things are changing ever since COVID. And they're as Dee Snider would have said when we were kids, we're not going to take it anymore.
I'm of them. I believe that we are in some part we're a product of the information that's fed to us, especially if it's repetitive information. And again, that's even before we get to the question of whether or not the information is true, not misrepresented, but it's also a manipulation that you only continually show one side of the story.
True.
Why in 1934 did the FCC law for granting broadcast licenses prohibit foreign ownership of those licenses by more than 20% of per license
Right.
by non-US citizens? That is because these platforms that have broad message carrying capability and delivery are very powerful. I mean, there's a debate that continues on in our schools about what do our schools teach kids, and a lot of it's around framing everything. Now, doesn't mean that the school is not teaching truth, but if the school decides not to teach certain elements of Black history and slavery and Black people mistreatment in our country that was bad, it doesn't mean that they're not telling the truth, but it can shape people's thoughts and minds around certain issues if they do present, whether they do present it or whether they don't present it.
Right.
And I mean, my sense of it in the case of the Gaza, Palestinian, Hamas, Israel garbage is that there wasn't an equivalent amount of press about what Hamas did on or about October 7th to Israeli citizens. And maybe it was quick hitter, or maybe they just didn't have the ability to do it as long or as hard as Israel's done it. But there wasn't a lot of press around that. And to me, that's it's at least as equally bad, if not worse. So
there was, in your mainstream media and as well as, just stuff in general, there was a ton of information. That's all they really talked about, and comparing it to 9/11. And that was over, there was a lot of that. And then
it rose and fell very quickly.
And then, but that's the way,
like
the way the news cycle works.
Right.
There's I forget the statistic. I looked at when I was teaching, I used to talk about it, but I think they said the average news cycle for a story is 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they find something to distract you with the new thing is because they're bored of that story and then they move on to the next one. So, it was the same with Ukraine. It was the same with, with all these other ones. They're in the public eye for a little while and then people get bored and then they've got their algorithms.
It's no wonder that our support for Ukraine is waning, right? Because it's just the passage of time.
It's funny because every time we do get a new form of information delivery system, we have the same reaction.
Yep.
Radio, I think I mentioned this in a previous pod, radio, television, cable, online, YouTube, Napster.
What's different today is how pervasive it is.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's point number one. Point number two is kind of my broad stroke view of humanity is, it's to some extent, it's like, it's like Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth, right?
True.
We can't. Humans are not equipped to, and the method of dissemination now is inundation,
right?
And you're being inundated. I mean, 69-1 is not a fair and balanced scorecard for what they're putting out there. And you watch enough of this stuff, and it keeps it in your mind while the news cycle maybe six days.
Right.
This stuff, that amount of information repeated over several months, it'll start having an impact on people. Sure. And that is a concern.
But it's the same. The only difference is that TikTok has a whatever percentage ownership by China. That's the only difference. It's not what they're doing is no different than X or Instagram or Facebook, and
that we know of.
the,
I mean,
I
in,
mean,
in terms of,
I guarantee
we
you,
don't know what their algorithm is tipping their. We don't
they're
know
all
what
very,
their
I
algorithm
mean,
is
they
or
all
isn't
do their own
tipping their finger
algorithms with
scale
their
on
own
something.
agenda. But I guarantee you, if I went on X, well, not X, let's use Facebook. If I go on Facebook and I click an ad about lighting, lighting for my house, that I'm going to be overwhelmed with ads about lighting. And I need and I definitely have had the situation where I have said something, a conversation with my wife, and I swear, and I immediately was inundated with those things without even clicking anything. So we all know what these social media sites and the internet and Google and all, we all know what they're all doing. And then until the government decides that we're going to put a stop to all of it, because we all know that there was definitely influence in certain stories about somebody's emails a few years ago and when the stories dropped and all that stuff. There just is. And they don't, that's my level of frustration. Like, I'm watching a documentary on Netflix now called Five Came Back. And it's a 3-part documentary. I've only watched the first part. And it takes place, it's a documentary about the filmmakers like John Huston and, that group of guys that were winning all the Oscars back in the day, and how they all enlisted essentially to work for the military to make video propaganda for the United States. And one of the statistics that came up in the first episode was that 90% of the American population went to the movies at least once a week in the late 1930s. It was the only way to get visual information besides a newspaper, but and obviously radio. But if they wanted to see visuals, the only place to see visuals of what was going on in Europe, et cetera, whatever was going on in baseball or whatever, was to go to the movies to see a movie, but also to watch the reels beforehand.
The Edward R. Murrow news clips.
Propaganda of the time, they were, and the United States government and Hollywood worked together to create propaganda because they needed to get young people, once we got to 1941, to want to be in the military and want to carry a gun or fly a plane and kill people in other parts of the world. And they brought in the best filmmakers in the world to do this. And you could argue, well, it was important because of the enemy we were fighting, and there was a lot of people didn't want us to go to war. But either way, regardless of whether it's right or not, the federal government and Hollywood, they were the internet of the time, and they manipulated what everybody was seeing and thinking. So we've been doing this forever. Like, it's just a question of now all of a sudden China's involved.
And I think it's a significant question that China is involved.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think China, I guess I even said it. I think China should have to sell their percentage in TikTok. And if
I wasn't arguing the point. I was just I didn't mean to accuse you that you thought any differently. It was just that it is.
No, I didn't think you were.
It is, it is significant. And it is significant that, a lot of the people, when you watch Oppenheimer and you watch those movies, as postscript, many of those people were European-based people who were working on the bomb, the atomic bomb that helped the Americans at least maybe end the war faster or prevent losing the war by getting the bomb first. And that's, all that was inviting foreign involvement in that case. So anyways, at the end of it, it's just, it's interesting to see what's your prediction. What do you think is going to come of this? Do you think the whole thing will die? The bill will never get through the Senate. It'll just die and be
the funny thing about it was
around till November.
The funny thing about it was the flip-flop by Trump because of his connection with some of the folks that are going to maybe purchase ads in his or donate money into his campaign.
That was suggested, but I also think I think he's got a real interest in keeping bad news for Biden in the minds of people. I think it's a winner for him to keep that stuff going.
Sure.
Right.
Which is why you've seen a change in philosophy by a lot of folks in government. Yeah. But my personal thing that will happen is first it'll go to court. because everything goes to court. So it'll get delayed. So if they force China, because it is still pretty early in the year, so I do feel like there will have to be, if China's going to have to sell their thing, a group of people will come in and they'll buy it. And if the algorithm changes, people won't notice it right away. And those companies will hire really smart people. Some of them have moved here from China because they'd rather move here and make a lot more money. And they'll basically recreate an algorithm, which is similar to the algorithm, except, China won't have access to the data. And if they can't do that, then everybody will think it's a crappy product. Like, remember we used to all go to McDonald's?
Yeah.
And now we don't go to McDonald's. Wanna know why? Because you go to McDonald's and it looks like you're at like a tech center for like for a startup company in like, Silicon Valley. It's like, do you sell hamburgers here? No, we don't. We can't sell the hamburgers anymore, but look at the really nice coffee machine that we like the environment, like that company obviously doesn't have the influence that it once had, is because they changed the design. And what will happen to TikTok is if they can't find a way to meet the needs of those folks, they'll move to Instagram. And they'll do it there, or they'll do WhatsApp, or some other company there'll be, a new social media company, because
owned by Saudi Arabia.
Market will drive an app. If these apps can't handle.
Yeah, there's obviously a
new one will come out.
There's a want. People
or
want
another
that.
one will adjust, and then we'll have the same conversation.
Somebody's got to fill in the demand somehow.
So I think because the election's so far away, if the election was closer, my prediction would have been that they wouldn't resolve it by the election, and then after the election, no one will give a shit.
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of McDonald's, Rich, thanks again for your input today. I think it was a good discussion. And in the spirit of McDonald's, you deserve a break today. So, I'm going to move on to the final section of the podcast.
Okay.
Part we call the reboot. So, our reboot is the conclusion of the topic, and it's a chance where I get to summarize some of the things we talked about and conclude where we feel and what we feel and what I believe is my opinion on what's going on with TikTok and what's going to happen next. But my opinion, requiring the Chinese government to sell its interest in TikTok seems like a good idea. The risks related to the Chinese government's ability to affect U.S. public opinion are too great. China's history of corporate espionage, government system hacking, and balloon spying are just a few points of evidence of their bad intentions. And what if they invade Taiwan? Will TikTok be used to affect U.S. public opinion and make a Chinese takeover of Taiwan easier? Beyond the singular issue of TikTok, the U.S. government needs to do more when it comes to data privacy and controls. It might start by implementing a data privacy control laws akin to those in the European Union, and also by reducing the so-called Section 230 protections, which is a part of the law which basically provides immunity for online computer services with respect to third-party content generated by its users. Such changes could make it more difficult for foreign governments to access user information via data brokers and become political influencers. In the big picture, I think what is also necessary is more controls on all media generally. While we live in a connected world, we still need to protect our own country first. Sometimes this means limiting certain forms of speech and communications. While I'm always leery of our government taking on that task, I'm afraid we have little choice when it comes to less than friendly foreign interests. We just need to make sure our government stays on point and does not go too far. And with that, I've gone far enough on the topic of TikTok for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to meeting you and talking with you on future episodes of They're All Lying to Us. And reminder to visit our website for past blogs and copies and access to copies of other of our podcasts, which are also now available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Look for our website, www.lyingtous.com, and look for They're All Lying to Us on any of those podcast sites. Thanks and have a good one.